Greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. This is just a very tentative welcome to each and all. My name is Azza Karam. I'm delighted to have the honor to be with you here today to co-moderate this meeting. Now, once again, formally, I welcome you all. I especially welcome my colleague on this particular journey, Ms. Gillian Triggs, the UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection. And I wish to express sincere gratitude to her and to UNHCR's leadership under Mr. Filippo Grandi for the courage and the leadership they demonstrate in establishing this very first structure of its kind, a multi-religious council of leaders. Indeed, UNHCR has a history of leadership in this space, of engaging with different faith-based organizations, understandably given its very critical mandate, which is shared by almost every single religious institution and faith-based NGO. But this is the first time in the history of different United Nations entities to indeed establish a multi-religious council of leaders, of religious leaders. So a great salute from the heart to our distinguished leaders of UNHCR, and a very, very warm, respectful welcome to the leaders of this multi-religious council of religious leaders who have agreed to come together to serve together the cause of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in this world, a cause which, in view of the number of refugees, has become part and forcibly displaced people has become highly, highly relevant unfortunately, in our lifetimes. We salute the religious leaders who agreed to come together in 2020 to foster greater collaboration with one another, with themselves, with other religious leaders, with faith representatives, specifically on reconciliation, peace building, and social cohesion, with a destination in mind. And that destination is the Global Refugee Forum, due to take place in 2023. The intention for today's meeting is to review how the role of our distinguished religious leaders and religious leaders in general, and specifically these members of the Multi-Religious Council, can be further strengthened, supported, understood. Today's session, I hope, will allow us to listen, learn, review, and explore examples of multi-religious efforts to promote protection and solutions for the forcibly displaced, for refugees, for the stateless and internally displaced persons. We are gathered here today to hear and learn from one another what the respective efforts of these distinguished institutions represented by these leaders are, what each of them and their institutions are doing already in this space. But we are also challenging our distinguished leaders to understand, to help us understand how and in what ways they are working together. They are collaborating together between themselves, among themselves, with governments, and with other stakeholders. The key verb beyond that of service to refugees, displaced persons, the key verb that we will want to keep close to our mind and heart and reflect on is, what is the collaboration? What is the partnership? What is that looking like, especially between and among religious leaders and faith institutions and governmental and intergovernmental partners? We know already, without a shadow of doubt, that religious institutions are the original humanitarians, the original educators, the original healthcare providers, the original diplomats. We know this. Those of us who have worked in this space have had to be very respectful and humble of this piece of learning. We, the secular actors, are the new people on the block. but the religious institutions and religious leaders in particular are the very original fountain of knowledge, of wisdom, and of action on these areas. This, perhaps, we do not need convincing of. But what we do need to learn, what we do need to understand, what we do need to urge together is to understand how religious leaders and religious institutions are actually working together in spite of their differences. This is the heart, this is the tipping point of the transformation we need to be servants to people of need around us everywhere in the world. Unfortunately, too many people of need. How we work together, especially as communities of faith, is the distinction between social cohesion and the alternative nobody wants to live through, that we are indeed living through today, which is that of lack of cohesion, which is that of discrimination, alienation, marginalization. We make a difference by supporting and learning from you, faith leaders and religious institutions, teaching the rest of the world how it is that we can work together better to serve everyone at the same time. So I'm delighted we have this opportunity to reflect on some of these issues, to highlight the experiences that are being brought to the table, and to be able to pay even a tiny, tiny tribute to the remarkable efforts being done by faith communities, religious leaders, and religious institutions around the world. We hope that you will help us understand and point out how you advocate, how you persuade, how you encourage the faith-based humanitarian NGOs, the governments, and the multilaterals to work together. We look forward very much to the learning that we will have. I have spoken too long. It is time to hear from our distinguished counterpart and leader from UNHCR, Ms. Gillian Triggs, UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection. Please, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Karam, or Azza. I know she's a very approachable person, and it's always an absolute pleasure to follow her because she gives me the words collaboration and together, and that is really what we're trying to do. I think one thing I'm really excited about in this second meeting, and I'm here, of course, on behalf of our High Commissioner, Philippa Grandi, but the purpose of this meeting is really to take us forward because we've been through all the usual stages. We've agreed in principle that we would need the leadership of faith groups. We wanted an advisory multi-religious council of leaders to advise the UNHCR and the High Commissioner. We've done all the due diligence. We've invited you. You've said yes. You've come together, and we've had our introductory meeting. But it seems to me that today is when we start to really get to some of the action to think about what we need to do and how we can listen to your advice and develop the work that we're doing. I very much appreciate Azza's point that we need to be modest and recognise, of course, within the UN system, that faith groups are the ones who've led the way on humanitarian responses to the plight of those in such desperate need. And we really learn from your example. And indeed, at this meeting, we want to hear from you. I can see a good list of people who've joined, and I won't speak for too long, but we want to listen to you. That is the point of this advisory body, and we'll take these messages back to the High Commissioner. Can I begin, however, on perhaps a rather grim note? But that is to say, what an extraordinary period we're in of challenge to assist people in need of protection. This year, we have reported 82.4 million people displaced, either within their own country or across boundaries, in dire need of support. And this number, by the way, is 17 million more than the number at the time that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were established in 2015. This year alone, the United Nations Refugee Agency has declared 21 new conflicts and emergencies globally. And we are attempting to deal with those emergencies across 550 field offices, operations, and groupings of UNHCR offices across the world. It is a huge challenge, and we see them multiplying almost daily. And so the message that you can help us bring from faith-based communities is critically important. We've also known, of course, in this time of COVID, that it's been faith groups who have stayed in the communities, and they have provided that support. They are not dependent on contracts or on all the money. They are there across all of these emergencies, and that is why we've learned yet again, of course, in the COVID context, how very important you are, and how important you are to the secular side, the UN side, to achieving the objectives of protection. Of course, it's also important to recognise, and you know this very well, that 80% of people in the world are driven by spiritual values of one form or another, and that is a huge power for us to use. We particularly see your role in reconciliation, in peace building, in social cohesion, but most importantly in solidarity and welcoming the stranger. I think it's such a powerful idea, and one that we want to use in the work that we do. I also would like to welcome the commitment of the Multi-Religious Council of Leaders in responding to the rising level that we know we're seeing globally of xenophobia. That we're seeing stigmatization of communities. In some cases, even the health pandemic is used as a basis for closing borders, for denying access. And we know that it's the voices of faith-based groups, but particularly the leaders of faith groups, that can help overcome that divisive rhetoric. So thank you. And I very much appreciated the statement that was made by Religions for Peace World Council in 2020, that exclusion costs while inclusion pays. And I think that's something that we'll take back to our own thinking about this. But I did want very briefly, before I pass over, because it's your advice we're looking for, that since the inaugural meeting on the 13th of April with 80 religious leaders as part of this council, some really interesting and important advances have already been made. And I congratulate Professor Karam for her leadership and the leadership of each of you in ensuring that some of these have happened. And I'll just mention three. One is in South Africa, the Fraternity of Ministers lobbied with the government to address the plight of undocumented children who are out of school. It's a very serious problem that we know well in the UN Refugee Agency, that people without documentation for whatever reason, but increasingly for the failure or inability to register children at birth, means that they don't have access to social services, and it's very difficult to get them into schools. But their efforts, the Fraternity of Ministers, resulted in a court case brought by the Centre for Child Law, in which the court made a finding that there's a constitutional right to education for everyone, regardless of their identity, legal status, or nationality. And the other example I wanted to raise was that the pandemic has shown how crucial local leadership is to build resilience and social safety nets for refugees and host communities. In Syria, for example, local Muslims and Christian leaders came together with Al-Kansa village leaders to deal or discuss the number of thefts of Christian people's homes. And that led to an opportunity for the community to understand better why the thefts are occurring, and to develop mechanisms to address the causes and all the stigma that arises in those communities. And another example is of young religious leaders, and I love the fact that they're young. They are young religious leaders. Have a project called Beyond, which deals with racism, nationalism, xenophobia, and migration in Serbia, Kosovo, Hungary, and Italy, and they are engaging in discussion, in various activities, and in using their voices in the public arena to explain a future that they see beyond xenophobia and migration. And last month, in the 2021 Global Interreligious Council in Lindau, Germany, leaders discussed and made really concrete recommendations on how multi-religious collaboration can transform the violent conflicts that we're seeing and to promote harmonious societies. So this is an opportunity today for us to listen in substance to your voices. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And back to you then, Professor Karam.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Ms. Triggs, for the kind words, but especially for your highlighting of these among the many examples of multi-religious collaboration that are taking place. I wish Religions for Peace could take credit for any of them. Actually, we can't. These are exclusively the initiative of the different religious leaders in countries. And it is usually at the local level that you see the manifestation of some of these, because they are responding to incredible need in those spaces. And that is how interreligious councils, in fact, are born. Out of the 90 interreligious councils, Religions for Peace simply was presented with, we are forming an interreligious council because we want to work together to do X or to do this, to respond to this humanitarian crisis or to respond to this political situation. So we are always humbled to hear the work of the different religious leaders. And we sometimes learn about it post facto, that they have come together, they have done this together. And it's always such a source of humility and inspiration. And this is precisely what I believe we have an opportunity to hear together now, the different initiatives that the different faith leaders, young and older, are working on to achieve together. Thank you so much for that. I would now take the opportunity with great pleasure to show a video that has been compiled by colleagues who worked very, very hard at UNHCR to put this together with our distinguished members of the Council of Religious Leaders. So please go ahead and show the video. Thank you so much.
Leaders from the Islamic community and the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Catholic and the Protestant and the Jewish communities, when we stand shoulder to shoulder and say, our values teach us to welcome that stranger.
So it's not simply a ritual, it's not simply a holiday reminder, it's not simply a sacred text, but it is an actual relationship which one experiences the commonality of human experience, even with different faith commitments.
Refugees can lose a lot, but never their human rights. Let's work together for inclusive societies, making sure refugees and migrants have a seat at decision-making tables and nurture healing, learning and shining communities.
It is said guests should be considered as God. God will come in the form of a guest. If we treat him like God, then God is going to bless us. In the form of refugees, God himself is coming to us.
الدين الإسلامي الحنيف يدعو إلى دعم اللاجئين ومساندتهم والوقوف إلى جوارهم. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وقف إلى جوار من لجأ إليه وسانده وانتصر له حتى عادت إليه قضيته وعادت إليه دياره. فالإسلام به أحكام عديدة لدعم اللاجئين وحسن معاملتهم وجبر خاطرهم.
というのは私という存在は私以外のすべての存在に支えられているというふうに仏教では考えるからです。ですからもし難民の人が苦しんでいるとすれば、それは私の問題と同じことだと私たち仏教徒は考えます。
That whenever, for example, a stranger or a refugee migrant comes to your lands, there's certain principles that we find within the Quran and prophetic traditions. And really, I would say, four are pertinent: to house the stranger, to feed them, to clothe them, to educate them.
Welcoming people, especially in the context of migrants and refugees, means making them feel at home. We welcome people because we too would like to be welcomed like them if we were in a different situation.
Wars and violence can happen everywhere. Welcoming refugees and fostering social cohesion and environment where different and other are understood and accepted should be a task for all of us.
ถึงแม้โลกของเราจะมีประชากรโลกมากกว่า 7,000 ล้านคนแต่เมื่อกล่าวโดยเชิงคุณภาพแล้วก็เหลือเพียงคนเดียวเท่านั้นนั่นก็คือคนที่มีความต้องการพื้นฐานเหมือนกันอันได้แก่เราทุกคนต่างก็รักสุขเกลียดทุกข์และกลัวความตายเหมือนกันหากเราเข้าใจความต้องการพื้นฐานอย่างนี้แล้วเราจะอยู่ร่วมกับคนทั้งโลก ด้วยไมตรีจิตมิตรภาพดังหนึ่งโลกทั้งผองเป็นพี่น้องกัน
Well, that was a beautiful video. We want to thank our distinguished religious leaders as well as our partners, the UNHCR and the team that put this together. It's indeed an exceedingly well done. And if at least a minimum message that comes out is that how critical it is for each faith tradition to indeed welcome, not to shun, not to build walls, not to build barriers, but to welcome amidst. I'm particularly taken by the point that every stranger is like God. If we welcome them, we are welcoming the divine within. A beautiful point made by so many. Thank you so much indeed. And something that Commissioner Triggs also you mentioned in your own words. Thank you for this. We now have the exciting opportunity to not listen to us anymore, but to listen to the faith leaders themselves. And I wish to just make one point of clarification. We speak about religious leaders and faith leaders. We indeed honor those who have studied and labored a great deal to learn their traditions and to serve their communities. But we also include a rubric within this faith leadership, a rubric of people of different age groups who may not be ordained religiously, but have indeed for some time now served their respective communities, inspired by and based on their own faith principles and traditions. So these are not ordained leaders, they are servant leaders as well. We, in our multi-religious council, made sure to be inclusive of this very critical community, also because it opens the door for young and women who would otherwise be excluded if we use the traditional term or definition of a religious leader. So we've expanded this to include those whose service based on their religious beliefs and commitments entitles them to be faith leaders as well. So this is the composition and what makes this particular multi-religious council and the work of Religions for Peace rather unique is that we have welcomed the servant leaders in the Council of Leaders, both of the Religions for Peace World Council and also of this particular council. So we pay tribute to all. We have an opportunity now to listen to our religious leaders, our faith leaders. This is now the roundtable part of the actions to implement the Global Compact on Refugees. And I would like to call upon, I believe, one of our, everyone is welcome to indeed consider how they would like to answer two questions we shared as in advance as a way of just stimulating your own thinking and discussion. The two questions were, what have been your actions so far? The video shows some, but that you are doing so much else. Perhaps you would care to share one initiative, event, consideration that some of you have had, considering the Global Compact on Refugees in 2023. But also, if you can, we would like to ask you what are the multi-religious initiatives that you have either already been involved in, or are being involved in, or are considering. So really two questions: something that you would care to highlight, in addition to the video, about your work at the moment within your communities as faith leaders, and how you have been working multi-religiously, if at all, in this context. So. If I may, just because it's very difficult for me to see you all, but I do know that if you'll allow me, we had asked, oh, I see, excuse me, very deeply. It seems that I am there's another video, and they are, it's important for me to please ask Commissioner Gillian, would you please introduce this other video?
Oh, I'm very sorry. This is something that we should have introduced a little bit earlier, but it's just such a lovely thing to add to the discussions. But the Venerable Prior of Thailand shared yesterday a video in which he reads a poem that he wrote about Afghanistan. and it shows how religious leaders can use their unique voices to promote solidarity towards refugees. So if we could just take a minute to watch it, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much.
แจ่มใสเพียงดวงดาวพร่างพราวฟ้างดงามกว่าเพชรรีมณีสินล้านเรื่องราวควรอ่านปานกวินเพลงแผ่นดินอัฟกันอันตราตรูคืนดวงตาแสนงามตามจริงเถิดให้ดวงตาได้เปิดสู่โลกหรูฟ้าสีฟ้าน้ำสีน้ำเลิศดำรูให้เธอรู้ให้เธอเห็นความเป็นไปขอให้หูเธอได้ฟังระฆังเงินให้ตาเธอได้เผชิญโลกสดใสให้ปากเธอได้พูดพร่ำคำจากใจให้เท้าเธอได้ย่ำไปทั่วโลกาขอสมุดปากกาอนาคตขอเด็กๆอย่าเก็บกดการศึกษาขอเสียงหัวเราะใสก้องไพรวาขอดวงตาเธอยิ้มกว้างอย่างเสรีขอดวงตาเธอยิ้มกว้างอย่างเสรี
Your Excellency, Fra Michiro, thank you very much indeed for these beautiful words of wisdom. We are reminded with this gorgeous poem that some religious leaders are also poets, and in fact, a great deal of original poetry came from the religious and spiritual realms. So thank you very much indeed for sharing this beautiful one with us, and thank you to UNHCR for this lovely surprise. Happy to now begin the roundtable part, the discussion between and amongst religious leaders. Poetry is absolutely welcome. I have the names shared by my colleagues for those who would speak. If you will please allow me to continue on the rhythm presented by the beautiful poem by asking Ms. Emina Filyak to start. Emina, please share with us what's on your mind.
Greetings of peace from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I do hope that you can hear me. I am in a bit loud space. I really apologize, but I'm actually, just speaking to you from the part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is the most affected by the migrations, because I'm actually traveling to this part at this moment. So what I would like to share here is, as already said about the initiatives that are happening, one of the initiatives that Ms. Gillian Triggs already mentioned, the Beyond project, is something that we are currently implementing. And just in a few days, first of the trainings will begin in Hungary, and the second one we will have in Bosnia and Herzegovina in January. So the project is already happening, and we are already speaking about the issues of xenophobia, migrations, identity, etc., with the young leaders, with the young people who are going to convey their messages to other young people. Another point which I really would like to highlight here is the video that we had the opportunity to see, because the video shows the power of this multi-religious council. It shows where we come from. It shows all the diversity that we actually represent, and it shows what kind of change and what kind of difference we can bring. And this is something that I, as a young person, because I feel that I really need to represent the young voice in this council, I have to emphasize that we really have to use the power of the media and the power of social media that we have. And all the initiatives that we are having in our own, as you, Professor Karam, said, local initiatives on the grounds, we need to show them to people so people can learn from them. People can see what can be done, what people are already doing, and what they can somehow convey within their own I don't know, local communities within their own initiatives. So I would really encourage us as a multi-religious council of leaders to use this voice, to use the social media, to use what we can, and to convey the message to people, to appeal to the compassion, to the empathy that we can actually share and that we can actually show to people. So to some kind of call for action. And I think this is an amazing opportunity for us because we come from completely different backgrounds, and we probably won't be able to see each other in person for a long time, but we can definitely convey the message of solidarity, the message of dignity for every possible human life. And we are coming from the different religious, ethnic, national, or any kind of background. And this is something that we have to convey to people, that it's possible to work together despite the obstacles, despite the differences, despite the distance that we have among each other. So I think this is really important, and this is very important message that we have to convey. And I would definitely call my fellow leaders here in the council to think how we can convey this message together and how we can convey the call for action. And definitely this is the time to start to think what can we do in 2022. So for now, I would just leave the floor, but I'm here to speak more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Emina. I think you've done two very important things. You have highlighted you've laid the gauntlet, so to speak, by making the call to action from your fellow leaders on this council to use social media and to use social media in a way that can be constructive, inclusive, welcoming, and abide by the shared common values amongst all the faith traditions. So the third thing you also did, which is extremely valuable, is you positioned yourself to be a key person who can help in this space. So here is the ask to all the faith leaders, and here's the person who can work with you to ensure that a set of common messages in readiness for the Global Forum of Refugees that can showcase your commitment to work together, your actual work together through social media can be made. And this is a very clear ask, but also clear deliverable. And you know who can be working together to make this happen. Thank you very much, Ms. Emina. And I would urge that the example you set be followed by the fellow religious leaders on this council. In other words, by all means, speak to your commitment, your values, your work, your extensive work, but also think in terms of what you would be ready to do with one another in this council as a council of religious leaders. Each of you is heading entities that does tremendous work. Very helpful for all of us to know what you are each doing. But this council is not created to showcase what you are each doing. This council is created to enable you to work better together as a multi-religious council of leaders on this set of issues. So we would like for you to follow Emina's example of catalyzing work amongst you, between you, all together, not only in spite of differences, but indeed precisely because of your differences. That is the value added, what you do together because you are different. So can we now hear, because I know that this is something that Bahai Mohinder Sahib has been very, very keen on advocating and doing himself. Bahai Sahib Mohinder ji, can you please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much. First of all, accept Sikh greetings. Vaheguru ji ka khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh. Today is an exceptionally auspicious day for the global Sikh community. We are celebrating 552nd birth anniversary of our founder Guru Nanak. And he has taught us many things. First thing, we believe that we are all one and that there is no enemy and there is no stranger. We also must feel a profound kinship with each other as human beings and the world we are part of. By seeing God in all, we are interconnected and we are also interdependent. So nobody is alone in this world. I will make a few comments here. At Nishkam, we have some visionary projects. These initiatives are, first of all, in the context of education, multi-faith education, multicultural, value-led education. Education should nurture wisdom and virtue alongside academic success. As an organization founded by migrants, we consider ourselves migrants, and well connected with civic developments, we have been able to combine professional expertise with sensitivity to community needs. We have, for example, prepared a peace charter for forgiveness and reconciliation, and we are making good progress with that one. Again, collectively, we are working on a museum of world religions, which will attempt to harmonize and share the rich legacies, traditions, and core understandings of faith communities to promote understanding the values and the underlying principles of each faith. We are making good progress, as I said, with this peace charter for forgiveness and reconciliation. We feel peace is so very important. Unless we have peace, there can be no development. We have projects, for example, place of welcome. We provide free weekly coffee mornings open to all and specifically targeted at new arrival communities and refugees. We work with Faith Action to deliver creative English classes, supporting conversational English to sport access and connecting with day-to-day requirement, making appointments with GPs, shopping, engaging with schools, accessing welfare support, empowering individuals to be self-reliant and promoting cohesion. We work on IT classes, supporting individuals to access and learn to use technology, helping them to use technology to connect with family, access online support service and agencies. We work with welfare service, providing welfare, debit, and housing advice and advocacy, promoting equality, social justice, access to support service, and signposting to support harmony and integration processes. We provide volunteering opportunities to develop confidence, develop skills, and empowerment. We work collaboratively with Citizens UK and the West Midlands Strategic Migration Partnerships. All support services are open to all refugees and communities, irrespective of faith, etc. We actively encourage participation through our interfaith networks to be involved in Interfaith Week events and World Interfaith Harmony Weeks. We convene and host multi-faith, multi-agency meetings to facilitate and coordinate services for Afghan migrants, ensuring that the migrants' voice is heard. We work closely with national government bodies responsible for the coordination of migration services, especially those waiting for permanent housing. And so we carry on believing that we are all connected and we have a responsibility and obligation to look after each other in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Bahai Saib Mohinderji. I think you have you've given a great deal of work that your community is doing to serve everyone, and this is something that we are humbled by. And I hope that your fellow colleagues on this session are able to also contribute in a similar fashion. And we know that you are working with many faith communities and faith leaders systematically at the national UK level, and you've made yourself extremely available to work with and to, in fact, develop globally a charter of forgiveness that is very, very central to this work that you take and undertake. And we hope that this council can find it of convenience to them to adopt this charter of forgiveness and to take it further in their own communities, because it is co-developed by all faith leaders. So Bahai Sahib Mohinderji, I think you always systematically present an example of multi-religious collaboration across different religious streams, barring none. So thank you very much for your work and for your leadership. I'd like now to take the opportunity to invite Judge Muhammad Abdul Salam to speak to the work of the Higher Committee on Human Fraternity. He has been a very important leader in developing a seminal document between Catholic and Muslim worlds, especially Sunni Muslim worlds. So we look forward to hearing from His Excellency Judge Muhammad. Please.
لا يوجد. There is no. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Azza. I would like to greet you, and I would not take much of your time, and I would try to abide by the rules, but I also want to greet Gillian and all the efforts that has been exerted. You two are great leaders and a role model of women, how you deal with these files. And I have a great pleasure to be with you. And I believe that the world has paid attention to the importance of the religious leaders around the world. We talked about a summit about climate change within a religious leader, and I see that the council is now ahead with the work and the collaboration with the UNHCR, HRCC. It is one of the great issues that we need to tackle, and I want to, of course, I greet you all. And Imam Sayyid, also I greet you from here. I want to say that it is important that the spiritual effect of the religious leader be eminent, and I think, Professor, that we need to have an initiative that start from the leaders, the religious leaders, to revive the responsibility towards refugees. For example, in Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ibrahim was a refugee, Moses was a refugee. And I think that the youth don't recognize this, whether Muslims or Christians or from other religions, they don't realize this. We need a global initiative, humanitarian initiative from all the religions. And I believe that I would like to work very hard on this initiative to have a religious summit about refugees, to reconsider the concept of refugees. We need to revive this. We have a religious directive from and hadith that says that if someone has any inheritance, that can give it to anyone from Muslims, but he also says and specifies for refugees, anyone who pass by your door. We talked about the rights of neighbors, and Quran also said and talks about the right of that who's passing by. And I believe this is important. we need to revive the spiritual values of religions to support refugees. I don't want to take much of your time, but I would like to congratulate Bahi for the anniversary of his leaders, and I believe that we can provide all to the humanity as a whole. I thank you, Professor, and I believe that the issue of refugees is not of less important of climate changing, and those monies that we need to give for climate change and different summits needs also to dedicate to refugees. Thank you very much
for your excellent intervention, Excellency Judge Abdus I believe you have made a number of valuable interventions. You have also, like your sister, Ms. Amina, provided a very concrete idea for action. And as with the example set by Sister Amina, you have also suggested that you would be willing to help concretize this suggested initiative of a coming together of this council and of faith leaders widely to speak together to the issues of the dynamic of refugees and forcibly displaced people in today's world, to put it very firmly on the agenda from a multi-religious perspective. What is the multi-religious role in serving these communities today? What is the obligation? What is the added value of multi-religious collaboration? Please be assured, Judge Abdus that the Global Compact for Refugees in 2023 would serve as a wonderful opportunity to bring to the table that the fruit of such a convening, of such a deliberation. So if you would help this council in indeed having this deliberation, in hosting it, the outcomes of this deliberation can then be also brought to the governments during the Global Compact on Refugees in 2023. So this is a very practical, concrete journey that you will co-steward for this council. And I'm sure that the faith leaders will be only too pleased to be able to work with you to realize this initiative. So thank you very much for making that offer and that very concrete intervention. We have an opportunity, inshallah, in 2022 to do this and to bring this as one of the many results and fruits of your multi-religious collaboration to the governments with some very concrete recommendations for what governments can do differently to address these issues with you, alongside you as faith leaders from around the world, from representing every religious tradition. So thank you very much. And again, I would hope that we don't forget the very valuable input that is already a fruit of much years of labor that Bahai Sahib Mohinder Ji has worked on, which is the Charter of Forgiveness, which is a very important aspect of this reconciliation. And thank you, Judge Abdus for highlighting that the issues of climate change are not to be distinguished in any way, shape, or form from the calamity of internal displacement and refugees. Indeed, all our issues are intertwined. The COVID disaster, public health disaster, the public health challenges that all the world faces today, epitomized by COVID, but no less important with the other diseases that many people are still dying from, millions are still dying from, which are preventable. So I thank you for pointing to the intertwining of these issues. Indeed, that is the value added of religious organizations, religious leaders. You see the connections between things. You don't work in only one area. You work together on many areas. And this is the value added that you bring to the table. Thank you very much. Rabbi Rick, I see you nodding. I also know that you have much to share. Can you please take the floor?
Thank you, Professor Karam. It is a blessing to be with all of you today and each day. And the work that we do together is stronger because we do it with our faith traditions, with our openness and our readiness to work in collaboration. I just would remind myself, and as I do, maybe share the beauty of this period in our calendar is we tell these remarkable stories about our first leader, Abraham, who was a migrant, who lived because of the love and the welcome that he experienced, and that we are to tell these stories so that we ourselves could live those values. And it is a powerful reminder, particularly when we have homes and we feel settled and we feel comfortable, to always remember that the refugee, the stranger, the one who is forced to leave their homeland, that is the face of our, not only our neighbor, but ourselves. So we respond out of that goodness. I want to share some very concrete examples of something that we have been doing with our multi-faith partners here in North America. I'm speaking to you today from New York City, and we created an institute that was inspired by the example of Eleanor and Gilbert Krauss, who in 1938, the two were just two people, not religious leaders, not world renowned people, just two leaders who had the opportunity to rescue 50 children before the gates closed in Nazi Germany. And they brought these 50 children here they couldn't come with their families. All they could do is get them out. These 50 children now are part of thousands who have created new lives. The grandchildren of these two people created the Gilbert and Krauss Initiative for Refugee Justice that is housed in Washington, D.C. And what we do is we make grants to local communities around North America, particularly communities that are working together with their Muslim neighbors, their Sikh neighbors, their Christian neighbors, their Buddhists, their Hindu, the entire beautiful assortment of faiths that make us strong and wise. And these grants bring the communities together to care for the refugees in their midst and to send clear messages to the wider community to combat xenophobia, to combat the sense that the refugees are somehow coming to take away their resources, as opposed to they're coming to bring their gifts, their talents, their love to our communities. The other piece of this work is to stand in multi-faith coalitions to advocate for the change of governmental policies. And I would just say humbly, here in the United States, we have been working very hard to change some very harsh policies that had been instituted in a previous administration. So we go to Capitol Hill and you go to Congress with our faith partners. We are much more eloquent. We are much more impactful when we go together and say these governmental policies do not reflect our religious values. So how do we care on the local level? We make grants, bring our communities together, raise a multi-faith voice together. We go to advocate for policies that reflect the humanity and the goodness of our faith traditions for our government. And in so doing, we first of all create bonds that are incredibly inspiring. They change us for the better. They make us who we are supposed to be. So I look forward to learning from my colleagues and from all of us, building more of these relationships to change in local places, changing the way one relates to another, to do it as communities, and then to do it as nations. And in so doing, we will realize God's vision for this world. God has only one family, and we are all a part of it.
Beautifully said. Thank you very much indeed, Rabbi Rick Jacobs. And thank you for highlighting what you yourself are doing at a multi-religious level nationwide in the United States. And a gentle reminder for people who may not know, the United States is a continent. So when things happen nationwide, it actually means it's a very, very massive initiative. It's not just an initiative in a small country. Thank you very much, Rabbi Rick Jacobs. And thank you for making the appeal for that multi-religious policy recommendations to governments. What is it that and this follows very well from the point and the advocacy made by both Judge Abdeslam and by Ms. Amina, where on the level of a convening, which can issue some very concrete policy recommendations that are multi-religiously endorsed, inspired, stipulated for governments in dealing with some of this work, and the commitments that religious leaders have to serve alongside. And what Ms. Amina indicated, which would be along the lines of a multi-religious social media campaign. These things can work together very, very well. Thank you for that assertion, affirmation, and for the work that you do. I understand that we have a few more colleagues who definitely must speak. So if you'll please allow me to call upon His Excellency Imam Sayyid Razavi. Imam Sayyid, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here to listen to our colleagues and friends. I know time is short, so I'll get directly into it. There's two questions that are posed, and there's two questions. What are we doing? I'll start off really on that. But before I do, just to say that it's very overwhelming, especially the work that needs to be done. There are three things that have been highlighted, which are a nexus, and we need to work together on that. One is COVID, the other is xenophobia, and the third is climate change. Bearing in mind that you have those three challenges, which are quite pressing at the moment in terms of forced migration, refugee, and in fact, asylum seekers. I think faith is important, but how faith works across regions isn't homogeneous. There needs to be multiple different strategies. So I'll start on what we're doing, then I'll go into the multiple different strategies within 2 minutes, hopefully. There are three things that we're doing at this moment in time, and all of them have to do with collective collaboration. So we're working with civic society, and as well as working with civic society, we're working with multi-faith actors to take the context of Scotland. The first thing that we're doing is advocacy work, so really upholding the rights of refugees. And there's really three things in this. The first is integration services, which focus upon two things. First is housing, giving housing advice, working with those people who are destitute, helping key family workers, and supporting families who are going through the process of asylum. The second thing, as well as working with the resettlement services, is working with local authorities to provide two things. Firstly, education, secondly, health. We're also working in terms of employment, so helping refugee communities to gain employment. And I think probably the biggest success story in Scotland's history has been the Syrian refugees, who at this moment in time are really punching above their weight because of the last 10 years and the work that's been done on the ground to integrate them in, to provide housing, and for them to actually open up businesses. So that's the first thing. Second thing is in terms of advocacy work. We're working together with the Scottish Refugee Council, which is a civic organisation, and faith actors to influence policy. And so for this, there is a link with the government, which we're working on the very things that I mentioned prior to that. Thirdly, it's really infrastructural development to be able to provide the country the infrastructure to be able to bring in refugees and to help them integrate further and better. One of the things that the faith community has done is help in terms of holidays. So many of these refugees who are coming in traumatized, under a lot of stress. We've actually organized for them on the Isle of Skye holidays. So that's some of the work that we're doing here. Now come over to the more, I think, the global. You've seen that religion does work quite effectively in certain areas in regards to both xenophobia and in terms of halting, really, returning some of the refugees back. Wonderful work that the Qadi Abdul Salam has done by bringing the Pope together and the Grand Mufti has led to a lot of peace internally within the Middle East. And I think there are certain places where religion plays a vital role. You saw that with the Pope and Ayatollah Sistani coming together. So Iraq now has seen an influx again of Christians, Yazidis, a Jewish community, which is now relocating again. And I think that going forward, if we have the meeting between the Grand Mufti and Ayatollah Sistani, maybe that would have an implication of helping to reduce xenophobia and otherwise bigotry. So I think that there's a lot of work that can be done specifically by faith actors in different parts of the world. In the Western world, again, through advocacy work in other parts of the world, direct influence, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So there's some of the things that we're doing. I'll bring it to a close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Imam Razawi, and thank you for highlighting the vital connectivity that exists, that you yourself are already serving in your national context, but also in supporting within the Iraqi context. Thank you for highlighting the remarkable value added of having His Holiness Pope Francis also meet with Ayatollah Sistani, and also setting at continuing the trend set by the work that Al-Azhar and Judge Abdus Salam, the Imam of Al-Azhar, with the support and the active coordination of Judge Abdus Salam, were able to do with His Holiness Pope Francis in the context of the Higher Committee on Human Fraternity, the document on human fraternity. This engagement of many religious leaders around this set of issues, and the examples set by the Muslim leaders with working with the Catholic leadership is extremely valuable. And I know that this is something that actually benefits from the work done in previous years and continuously done with the Jewish communities and the Vatican. And so there are many trends of goodness that are taking place and that are continuing to take place. And I believe that they answer some of the concerns that are still being expressed in the chat by many of our listeners, because the negative perceptions sometimes outweigh the very positive, every day, every minute of every day developments. The negative perceptions and the realities tend to be much heavier in weight and significance, and certainly in pain, than the positive actions that are being undertaken on a daily basis. And part of the mission of this council is to continuously not only speak to, but to showcase the collaboration, the forgiveness, the mercy of what faith leaders do and serve on a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, yearly basis together. So thank you for highlighting these very, very critical developments. Apparently they are never enough. Apparently you must continue to speak to what you are doing, to continue to work together, to showcase what you are doing. This is something that this council has to take very seriously. There is way too much pain, negativity, elements of destruction that faith communities can sometimes be very responsible for. So this council has the challenge of working systematically to showcase and to counter, not just balance, to counter and be heavier than the work of pain that is taking place by religious actors and communities. This is a very, very serious responsibility indeed. Speaking about the work of pain and healing, can I please hear from Ms. Nagiba? Nagiba, you do much work in Uganda on this area. Can you please speak to it? We don't have, unfortunately, that much time, but I really want to hear you speak, Ms. Nagiba. And I urge any of the other religious leaders who may wish to make a point, please also to prepare. Nagiba, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to first affirm the added value we have as faith communities. First of all, we are permanent. Wherever we are available, and we're in every space, different faith, and we're in every space. So we are I think we're good partners for anything. And this is one of our calling. Then the other thing is faith communities give hope. When everyone has lost hope, they can only get it through some kind of faith, some kind of belief. And places of worship become safe havens for everyone, whether they're refugees or residents themselves. And back to my question, what we've done as in Uganda, we've worked with the different faith actors, and through Interreligious Council, SCRL, and different religious communities working with refugees. I've worked especially with young people and the women. And we do the livelihood as one of them, but my special niche is to help the people heal. And we take them through a program. It's ethics education, where they have to kind of learn, relearn, and learn certain things about themselves and people around them and how they relate. By the time we're doing the second module, we are working together as young people. But that one came in because the refugees in Uganda have they were having problems with host communities because they seemed to be favored, yet the host community was living like in very poor settings, and the refugees were getting almost everything, while the hosts were getting nothing, and they were constantly in conflicts that had some of them even killing each other. So Interreligious Council had a program called Building Bridges, and I was invited to work, me and the women of faith, to be part of this. And I trained in ethics education, a program that helps people to learn to live together. And it's based on 4 values: empathy, mutual respect, responsibility, and reconciliation. And we believe that these 4 values encompass many other values. If we live them on a daily basis, it's easier to reconcile, it's easier to forgive. It takes time, but it helps also with healing, because it has many reflections on many inner mediation, and it helps people to rebuild themselves. We empower the young people because we have hope that one day they might have to go back to their homes, and we need them to support their own homes to build cohesive societies. Because when they're here, they're living with people who actually maybe killed their relatives, but under the same roof, under the same refugee settlement. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that. But bringing people have come in as refugees, but they're in the same tent with someone who killed their dad, their mom. It's traumatizing. So we do a lot of trauma healing, psychosocial support. Personally, I have a safe walking space, and my number is open to all the refugees I've met. They can call me anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Nagiba. I think it was very important for us to hear the specific work of women of faith leaders in this space as not only protagonists who are involved in the conflict itself, but also as healers in this space when they can come together and with concrete programs and initiatives. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Ms. Nagiba, you have pointed to the existence of plenty of resources already on the means of healing that are indeed used, and lots of experience gleaned from them, not only within Religions for Peace, but many of the peace building oriented NGOs and religiously oriented NGOs have tools already in presence and existence. So we don't need to develop new tools, but we do need to ensure that we can integrate this work and work more together to target the healing of communities, which is the most intractable and difficult thing to do. So thank you very much for this work that you do. And I have the great privilege now to give the floor to someone who's already moving. He's always moving, praise God, and that is Bishop Ilyas Tume, our Syrian distinguished leader. Bishop Tume, please, you have the floor in your movement. But you are muted. Can you please unmute? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, do you hear me now? Okay. First of all, really, I'm very sorry that I'm traveling, but I was really enthusiastic and interested very much to be with you. Even I was traveling en route, but I said I must be with you. It was a religious duty. I had a funeral and I had to do it. I have two points to share with you with great happiness. First point is maybe I in this council and this meeting I'm the opposite situation maybe, because I come from the homeland of refugees. Now all the world is speaking about the Syrian refugees. And this is our dilemma, this is our sorrow, that people, they don't want to stay anymore, they want to leave the country. And as religious leaders, we are trying to do our best and to make many appeals to many NGOs and countries and governments to help us to support the families here in the homeland and to make them not to move to be refugees. But unfortunately, because the circumstances now, they became very, very hard and very tough. They prefer to be a refugee in any country on the world, but leaving the situation here. And this is, I say that with broken heart and with a very, with a big sorrow. But the second point I can share with you that I had this experience with the displaced families here in Syria, which is kind of refugees, but it's interior refugees. It's during the war, many families, they have left their cities and came to my area, to Christian Valley. And really, I had this experience to deal with this such of problem. The people, they came traumatized, and they came with, let me say, very, very hard memories. They saw their relatives be killed. They came without anything. They left everything behind them. And at that time, we started how we can integrate them with the new community. And by passing the time, we could recognize some xenophobia, the hosting family. They were afraid about the new people that are coming. With the lack of and the shortage of the services, they start to blame them, to let me say, to blame them as one of the reasons that they don't have services and they don't have, let me say. So, and we were dealing with this with many religious leaders, because many of them, they were even Muslims from very far away cities. We made many initiatives to put the people together, to re-eat together, to let me say, relate together. They had a very good will to be together, but the war was very, very hard all above them. This is really what I had to share with you on this time, and I was very happy to hear some of you, and I'm very sorry again.
No, you have nothing to be sorry about. We have everything to be grateful for, Bishop Toomey. Thank you very much for making the time. It is indeed a very interesting fact that Bahai Saeed Mohinder Singh shared, that this is a wonderful opportunity and a moment to celebrate the birth of the Guru, who is a leader for the Sikh communities. And you share with us that you are coming back from a funeral. And this is indeed the cycle of life that you as faith leaders serve in so many different ways. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us. I think it's extremely valuable to hear your report out on the Syrian situation and context. Our media sometimes can be very fickle. It will focus on one thing at a time and everything else gets forgotten. And what you have brought to this table is the remembrance of the fact that the Syrian pain is still very much alive, very much in need of being attended to, and very much a feature of all our lives today. So thank you for that memory. Thank you for the work you do, remarkable work that you do, Bishop Toomey. We wish you much blessings with it. Please, Bishop Toomey, and ask from us to you. This is a multi-religious council of leaders who are created precisely in order to work with your UN system entity that is serving refugees and displaced persons. Please think of what you would find helpful in the context of your experience, your need of such a council. What can such a council do that would serve your needs, that are very much rooted in your context, that only you can speak to? What can such a council do for you? Think, please, and feel free to suggest to this eminent group of people what they can help you to do. Thank you very much, Bishop Toomey. I now take the opportunity, if you will allow me, please, to open the floor to the questions from different participants. We've already seen many questions on the chat. So I think I can probably thank you very much, first of all, for all the questions and for some of the comments that you have shared. Probably the most feasible way, given the lack of time, is to perhaps order them in a certain way. I noticed that some of the questions that were raised, for instance, by our colleague Juvenal Balisasa from the West Central Africa Division of Seventh-day Adventists in the Côte d'Ivoire, from the Emergency Management Director of ADRA, the Adventist Development Relief Agency in Kenya, Ms. Hannah Ndungu, and Mr. Joseph Namaulula, Social Cohesion Officer from the Lutheran World Federation, focus on how it is that this particular council can actually make a difference. And I'm paraphrasing your question, so bear with me. How this particular multi-religious council of leaders and religious leaders make a difference towards handling the differences between the religions themselves, between the dogma, the beliefs of the different religions, given that this is the conflicts that are taking place are affecting everybody, and vulnerability of people. The vulnerability is not limited to any one religious community. The vulnerability is common. So when conflicts take place, when natural disasters take place, everybody is impacted, and there is a perception that the religious differences between the different religions are actually a source of problems and conflicts. And I think many of you have addressed already how it is that you work together, including in conflict situations. But is there perhaps one or two of our leaders here who wish to address the issue of how to work together in religions, in situations of conflict that may even be religiously inspired or affiliated? What is it that you feel the role of this council could be in this space? Perhaps I will take the privilege of calling upon Rabbi Rick Jacobs and perhaps Imam Razavi to just provide a couple of, emphasize some of the things you actually mentioned already. But Rabbi Jacobs, religions differ. Religious leaders often are protagonists of their own faith tradition, their own faith principles. In situations of conflict, how can this set of coming together as a council or otherwise be actually a force for good?
Thank you for the question. And it is very much at the heart of what is challenging, but what is also powerful. We know that religions for peace, obviously, we can bring our faith traditions to raise a voice for justice, for peace, for reconciliation. But we also know the truth of our histories is that religions have oftentimes been the catalyst for these tensions. And I think what our multi-faith council and approach can be is that, first of all, just look at this screen and look at all the people here. In many places in the world, this would already be an argument. This is not an argument. This is a respectful, loving conversation of people who see the greater humanity in all of us. So we're asked to bring our own individual faith traditions and commitments, and every one of our faith traditions has a commitment to something bigger than the particular ways in which we worship, think, and do our holy work. And that as we model that, we can actually talk about some of the hardest things that we face. And more important than talking about them, what we have seen in granting grants to communities is roll up your sleeves. Don't actually talk, do. Feed the hungry. Find shelter for the refugee, the asylum seeker. Find ways to help them to self-sufficiency. By doing concretely, it moves us out of the places where we can posture to the places where we break down those barriers and we see the humanity, and our communities are brought into direct relationship, which breaks away many of those layers of distrust and of sometimes the way we have been taught to see the other, but to see us in our humanity. I think it is transformative. I think this approach is potentially globally transformative, but it begins in very direct, very human interactions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Imam Razavi, can you also speak to this point about what is it that, and maybe I can, if you will allow me, just complement with one of the other questions that was raised beforehand, is how is it that that these different religious leaders, yourselves, relate to the context of fulfilling your roles and responding to refugee needs, given particularly the current COVID-19 context? Can you perhaps address that issue? Remember that this is coming from a context of actually not knowing what religious leaders and religious institutions are doing. So some of the homework needs to be done by those asking the questions. But what is it that you know yourself to have been able to do that is serving together some of the needs, especially in these times of COVID?
I think it's quite an important question. I'd say very quickly, first in relation to the council, one must remember it's a network of great influence. There's immensely influential people around this discussion at the moment. It's phenomenal in the way that they can change lives of billions of people. Second point, I think, is that at least the Abrahamic faiths are migrant communities. So we've been doing it for 5,000 years. Be it Abraham, be it Moses, be it Jesus, be it the Prophet Muhammad, they were migrants. And so therefore their infrastructure is in place within the Abrahamic communities in different situations, in different circumstances. It's only very natural for faith leaders, therefore, to come together and work on this. And we're seeing a lot of this work being done by, for example, the Jewish community, the Muslim community within parts of Europe. We're seeing it amongst Jews, Muslims, and Christians. We're seeing it amongst the Abrahamic and the Adamic faiths. Concrete is, so I'll give you 3 examples of something concrete that we've been doing. So, for example, housing the homeless is something which has been done over this COVID-19 period. And again, it's been emphasized time and time again. Religious leaders or religious communities are first responders. Therefore, there are infrastructures in place. And you saw this on the streets of London within a week. I think 90% of all those people living rough found places to stay. You've seen food parcels. People on the front line have been religious communities to the extent of the NHS. So when there was a huge rush to go to Walmart or your Sainsbury's or your Tesco's, you had religious communities do shopping for those first responders, for the NHS, for the doctors, for the nurses, so that they had food to eat. So if the doctors or the nurses can't do their job, who can then do their job, especially within this crisis? You've seen examples for healthcare, in terms of healthcare for refugees, that they may not be in the system, but religious communities are able to provide a pathway for healthcare. We've been working on mental health. So we've built a network within Scotland, for example, where there's lacking. We're giving services or providing services to connect them onto those places on the grid, whereby people can go and get their counselling and work done in terms of mental health. So there's huge amounts of work which is being done. I could just list project upon project upon project, but that tells you that the religious communities, especially with policy change, have played an instrumental role, especially post-COVID in a world where we've seen a pandemic and we've seen governments are unable to deliver, but they've taken help from religious communities to do so. This is not just in the Middle East or in Africa, but this is actually deep in the heart of Western democratic countries that this is working. And so final point is this, that religion plays different roles depending on the structure of different countries, depending on the structure of their political systems. Sometimes a direct role in changing policy and helping and so forth, and sometimes an indirect role. So therefore, I would say not to underestimate, but the power of all these religious leaders coming together is a huge constituent, you could say, of influence. And I think we need to nurture that to achieve our goals going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And I think it's precisely showcasing the power of religious leaders such as yourselves when you come together, showcasing that power, that impact, that influence is the point that Judge Mohammed Abdeslam was urging us to do and has offered very kindly, I presume, through the Higher Committee on Human Fraternity to help us organize with UNHCR, obviously, and Religions for Peace, to help us organize this platform that can showcase this power and this magnitude of impact that is happening and potentially happening. So Judge Abdeslam, we're going to look forward to you to help us catalyze this initiative that you have put on the table. And Ms. Emina Filyak, we are going to look to you to help us catalyze the social media campaign that needs to be very much also included in this and an outcome of this, so that the messages of what religious communities are doing today individually to address the myriad psychosocial, spiritual, mental health, practical food, nutrition, sanitation needs, this work can be shared, because it seems from many of the questions that many, even those working within religious organizations, don't necessarily know what else the religious communities are capable of doing. So, Ms. Emina, your point about how to share, how to use social media to share the news, the information, the knowledge, the messages that need to be shared for not just tolerance, but for forgiveness, for compassion, for reconciliation, for service. This seems to me a very much needed set of campaigns. So we have at least these two concrete initiatives which have been demanded and indeed responded to by yourself. So Judge Abdesalam, we will look to you for help in the coordination of this global consultation. And Emina, we will look to you to work with Judge Abdesalam and everyone else here to ensure that the social media campaign is in sync. We can at the very minimum inform, at a very minimum advocate for more and greater collaboration. And at a maximum, we have concrete policy recommendations that can come out and be shared in the Global Forum for Refugees, not based on talk, not based on just advocacy, but based on actual initiatives that are undertaken in every part of the world, from Syria, Bishop Toomey's work, to Thailand and our venerables work, to everywhere in every corner of the world where you are already serving religiously and multi-religiously. Two concrete outcomes that I think are extremely helpful. Bahai Saeed Mundaji, we continue to look to you and your community to work with Judge Abdesalam, with Emina, with Rabbi Rick, with all of these members of this council to put the Charter for Reconciliation and Forgiveness very firmly on that global map as a key tool. And Ms. Nagiba, your concrete tools that you have developed and worked on and operationalized over many years, also to feature as the tools available for this work. Thank you very much. I'm very sorry for the lack of time. I would like to now ask, unfortunately, we have lost Ms. Gillian Triggs due to a humanitarian emergency. This is what they actually do. So we do have with us, we're very fortunate to have with us Ms. Safak Pave, who has been effectively the leader of the connectivity and the realization of this council. So Ms. Safak Pave, the floor is yours to give us your concluding remarks with my humblest of thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Karam. It's a great privilege, and please let me convey sincere apologies on behalf of UNHCR as well as Gillian Triggs, who had to run to another emergency, and she will be back-to-back field missions in the coming days as well. So I would like to just say on behalf of UNHCR here that we are delighted to have the council operating and to see our esteemed members together on boards with our long-term partnership with Religions for Peace, that it is opening a new gate for us for negotiations, for diplomacy, for advocacy with your influential voices. So thank you so much for the enthusiasm. I have, with such orators around this roundtable, I have very little words to contribute to as a humanitarian worker for more than 20 years, 22 years in the field as well. One is that, I don't want to get into the details of numbers that we are dealing with right now, but it is increasing, unfortunately, with the heartbreaking news that we are receiving every day from Afghanistan, on the ground, being on the ground ourselves as well. So I would like to speak on behalf of our 18,000 humanitarian workers and more than that, and 430 plus offices that we have. Our colleagues are working around the clock, selflessly. I've been privileged in my life to be one of them for a long period. Since my juniorhood, starting in Algeria, Tindouf camps, to working in Afghanistan in the hopeful period between 2005, 2007, when we were doing happy returns, or Myanmar, say it. So our colleagues are working everywhere, and they need the support of your influential voices What inspires me the most, having been worked on this portfolio for more than 2 years now, Professor Karam, having helped in small minor ways, for the establishment on behalf of UNHCR of this council. I really see the prospects where our religious leaders, esteemed religious leaders, members of this council, that can contribute to be part of the table of talks equally with other partners. And I see so much prospect in that regard, and we do need it on the ground as well. As we are speaking, we are trying to save lives individually in Afghanistan, whereas we don't have the mandate for it. So because it's only when the border is crossed or internally displaced that is given our mandate. So based on the Refugee Convention of 1951. But I just wanted to remind that with all your support and efforts, we can achieve even more. And that is embedded in the newly established 2018 December affirmation by all states, majority of states, that has actually affirmed the Global Compact on Refugees, that has the vision for the next decades to deal with any matter in a multi-stakeholder partnership approach that is embedded as a core principle inside it. And that is where very clearly is stated is to the collaboration with religious leaders, faith-based organizations that can play a very important and significant role. So I just wanted to state that from the what is perceived as secular international law, which is based on the very tradition of what you have stated, Professor Karam, at your opening remarks, that the tradition of building consensus, peace building, goes way back, thanks to religious leadership and the goodwill that was created. Say, for instance, Magna Carta, that again was actually a peace building or accord building initiative by a religious leader between the king and the citizens and the barons of the time. So there are so many examples of it. We can actually explore it further. But United Nations is built upon tragedies of humanity that goes way back to League of Nations, not only 1951 convention after the Second World War giant tragedy of humanity, but also the Armenian tragedy of displacement, 1914, 1915. So that is the principles that we're working on. It's not only the secular system, but it is actually working hand in hand that will make us find more solutions for the challenges that we're facing in the 21st century, unfortunately, due to a lot of root causes that are not being dealt with. So our message would be actually on behalf of UNHCR is to look at as much as possible for our esteemed members of the council to use their influential voices for advocacy as much as possible, to reach out to the community. The voluntarism that exists here around this table and beyond is so inspirational and so much of a support and great effort to actually complement the efforts of our humanitarian workers on the ground and in whatever conflict that they're trying to resolve and try to be a band-aid to what is being created by corruption, by greed of those warmongers, let me say that way. We are looking for peaceful solutions, and we look forward to further collaboration in the build-up to the next Global Refugee Forum in 3 years' time from now on. And this was great to hear the feedback. One question that I may answer from the chat that came, and that may actually maybe complement the great words by Venerable Pra, our UNHCR patron of compassion and peace from Thailand, who is also an esteemed member of this table, and he also conveyed his apologies that he couldn't be here today with you, is a poetry perhaps, and in response to a question that was posed in the chat. What about the youth, what they can do? I just want to respond as a humanitarian simple worker. on the ground, that by the words of Samuel Ullman, who has written a poem that has inspired generations after 1880s onwards, and that is called Youth. And we grow old by deserting our ideals. Years may wrinkle the skin, but giving up enthusiasm wrinkles the soul. So I would like to leave you with these words on this very holy day for many Abrahamic traditions, actually for Judaism, for Islam, for ecumenical churches. That is Friday. So, and I would like to leave you with these words and just trusting in the enthusiasm of youth, but not the age, but the commitment to humanitarianism. I wish you all a good night or maybe good morning. We had a very global participation here. We are very proud of our partnership, Professor Karam. So with all our gratitude and looking forward to our collaboration to come with great inspiration and gratitude for all your services to all our esteemed members of the Council. Thank you very much.